extending generated code. This is kind of not a web API thing, but it's something you need to be aware of if you're going to use code generation, that it's all well and good generating a controller class that has a certain number of operations based on the things that you're going to want, the get all, get one, create, update, delete, but you're probably going to want custom stuff as well. So the point is that how can you do that in conjunction with code generation? So we've generated so far model classes, repository interfaces, repository classes, and controller classes, and that will provide basically that create, read, update, delete functionality for anything that you've got declared in your repository right now, which is useful in its own right, but again, you're going to want custom stuff. So the way this tends to work, just really a pointer in the right direction, is, I don't know whether you've noticed, but everything that I've generated through the templates are all using partial. So if we go into the code and look at the interface that was generated, for example, models, iDepartment, repository, it says partial interface. So a partial interface can be extended more in another source file that is also the same partial interface. Also the repository classes, public partial class, okay? The controllers that were generated, department controller, public partial class. So these things can all be extended with custom code in separate files, and the two get merged together as a single entity, essentially. And that's the pattern. If you're doing any kind of code generation in the OO world and want to be able to extend stuff, then that's the pattern to use. I'm just going to go through a fairly simple example of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to customize our employee environment, and I'm going to add a custom operation. Copy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our models folder where we've got our employee interface and repository, and I'm going to say add new item, and I'm going to add an interface definition. It wants to be one of those. I'm going to create employee repository custom, okay, and then I'm going to change it to partial interface employee repository. So I'm providing more information into the partial interface that's already in the code generated stuff. And the custom operation that we're going to add in here is going to be an operation called read born before year that is going to accept a year and return a collection of employees. So something that couldn't be generated automatically based on keys that are defined in the repository. So there's the change to our interface. Let's save that. Then what we're going to do is basically do the same thing with the repository class. So we're going to add a class called employee repository custom. And this again is going to be public partial class employee repository. And then again, we've already got the other half of that in the other source file, and therefore we can implement a custom operation which matches the custom interface that we just defined. So again, same thing, but now we're going to write the code. We're going to be doing some select class code here, so we'll import the Synergex Synergy DE select namespace, and then let's set up some data for the code that we're actually going to write. So we'll set up something called results, which is a new list of employee, and employee rec, which is an str employee. The employee structure is defined in the code generated model class that we're already using. Okay. And then we're going to execute a select to go and get the data. So we will add the code for our select call for each employee rec in new select, new from file spec employee record, where, and there's our where clause, employee rec.date of birth 1 through 4 is less than a year, and year is a passed in. So a very simple, not based on a key filtering of the employee file to get us a collection of results. And then we're going to set up our return value. And again, we're returning a repository result just like the others. So if results.count is greater than 0, we'll return success. Otherwise, we'll return not found. Okay, so there's an example of a customization. Let's build it, and we should find that if we go to our environment now, What am I missing? Oh, sorry, that's the repository. We need to do the controller as well. Okay. So now we've got custom interface, custom repository, and we're going to do basically the same thing with the controller class. So we're going to add a new class. We're going to call it employee controller custom code. We're going to change the class to employee controller custom and conform with the partial class. So we're extending the controller with new information. And we're going to add our custom operation, which is going to be a method called getBornBeforeYear that returns an HTTP response message. And we're going to call into the repository. So we will declare what the route is that's necessary to access this operation with our route attribute, which we need to bring in that namespace for. And then we will interact with the repository in order to call the underlying environment. And I think I also need to bring in that one. Okay. So again, nothing really new here. This is just if you decide to do code generation, then how do you do side-by-side custom stuff alongside code-generated stuff? And now, if we go off to our environment, we should find that we have get API employee born before year, and well, let's try and call it. Let's just do it in here. So API employee / born before / 1975. There we go. Where are we? 1971, 1967, 1968. Okay, so there we go. That's how we can extend code-generated stuff using partial interfaces, partial classes, partial controller classes, and so on.